All right, so we've seen the Four Noble Truths. All life is suffering. Suffering arises from craving. In order to extinguish suffering, one must extinguish craving. And in order to extinguish craving, one must follow the Eightfold Path of all these right actions, and to do so sort of consistently and persistently. Now, one of the questions that comes up is, what exactly is it that makes this right? What is it that makes it not too much, not too little? And this is an important question because it's a question that is liable to be misunderstood, quite honestly. I think that there is a way, when we approach this, to think of this a little bit like, shall we say, Goldilocks. Not too much, not too little, but just right. That there's this middle amount that's just the right proportion. And actually, we see this in Western thought. Probably one of the best examples that we see of this is of Aristotle. I don't know how many of you guys have read the Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle, book 2 of the Nicomachean Ethics. But the idea that virtue exists in this golden mean between extremes, where you just do the right amount for the right situation in the right time, and you bring about through a set of habits and practical wisdom and will this quality of excellence. Well, this is a noble thought. It's a beautiful idea. Far be it from me to ever put down anything from Aristotle. But there is something that's problematic about it as far as understanding Buddhist thought. And the problem is this. We are not talking about a middle path that is positive. That is to say, we're not talking about the idea that you don't do too much and you don't do too little because there's this central spot that's just the right little amount to get to, like some sort of sliver of land between two swaths of the sea. That's not what we're talking about here. Rather, what we're talking about is a way of bringing your mind to a state of stillness, to a state where it neither grasps towards something nor pushes it away, but can simply be present to it such as it is. The mind and the body and the soul, everything, simply being present such as it is. This is the key to the middle path. This is what is being cultivated again and again and again in all of these readings about Buddhism, of trying to find this middle path, right? To bring oneself to a kind of stillness, a negativity, an emptiness, a space where the mind and body and soul are only present, not grasping, not apprehending, but only present. Now, why? Why this difference? Because usually when we hear this, certainly in the Western traditions, when we hear this of not too much, not too little, but just right, it's as though it's that there's this little bit that we have to apprehend, and that's not really what we're talking about here. Why is this the case? The reason this is the case is because of something that is very, very tricky within Buddhism. And the concept I'm about to talk to you about, the concept that sort of gives rise to the necessity of the middle path, is something called thusness. Thusness. Or sometimes it's translated as suchness. So suchness or thusness, but Tatthava in Sanskrit. Here's what it is. There is going to be the idea within Buddhism that there is no such thing as a thing. There's no such thing as a thing. Now, what does that mean? That is a real peculiar idea. Well, here's what it is. On one hand, when you try to think about anything, an object, an event, a person, yourself, anything, right? One of the things that you have to realize about it is that it is what it is by virtue of being a composite. It has parts to it. An up, a down, a left and right, a before or after, a you and me, a this and that. Anything, right? There's some way in which it is a composite, that it is composed. Okay? All right. Now, insofar as it is a composite, this composition has these parts, and these parts, in turn, are composites themselves. We can see this upon analysis. So that the composite has composites, and the composites of the composites have what? Composites. and composites. And indeed, one of the things that we see, this is a real important point in Buddhism, is that everything, insofar as it is what it is, everything insofar as it is what it is what it is by virtue of being a composite. Everything is what it is by virtue of being a composite. Nothing is simply itself, right? Everything is insofar as it has these parts that are coming together to make it what it is. Now, if that's the case, one of the things that you see is that everything can be sort of, for lack of a better word, perpetually decomposed. It can be taken apart and taken apart of the parts and the parts of the parts of the parts of the parts of the parts. And it can be done infinitely. You can't reduce it to anything. And so that leads us to a question of saying, what exactly is this thing that we're referring to? Well, honestly, this thing that we're referring to is no thing. There is no object, there is no event, there is no thought that cannot be reduced to reduced to reduced to reduced to reduced to literally no thing. So you might say, all right, fine, I guess nothing exists then. Except we got another problem. And that is that, yeah, but we're talking about stuff. We're talking about things, objects, you, me, this class, Buddhism, ideas, thusness, all this stuff. We're talking about these things. We're treating them like things. So what do we got? On the one hand, you can't really assert that anything exists because it reduces literally to no thing. On the other hand, you can't say it doesn't exist because it is present to be referred to. So what is it? What is anything? What are you? What am I? What are things? What are those things that we love and care about? What shall we say about them? What we can say about them is they neither exist nor do they not exist. Rather, they are merely thus. Very important. They do not exist. They do not exist. They are merely thus. And it is this idea of thusness, not existing, not existing, but merely thus, that becomes central to Buddhism. It becomes central to the middle path, because if this is the situation in which things are, if this is how things really are, that they are merely thus, then the only way in which we can understand them, the only way in which we can dispose ourselves toward them, to see what they are, to be rightly towards them, to hold them and regard them without attaching to them and suffering in the way that we do whenever we grasp towards something, without repelling them and pushing them away the way we do whenever we repel and push things away and hope that they don't afflict us. The only way that we can take it is as thus. So, the key ideas that I want you to get out of this little discussion. 1. The path to understanding the nature of something is not to say that it is or is not, but rather is merely thus. It is merely present. It's merely in the instant that it is, right? And that the Eightfold Path that we follow, the fourth of the Four Noble Truths, is practiced not because it's right, not because it's truth, not because God or Buddha or anybody else revealed it to us. It's because I'll tell you what it is. It's because it is practical. It is because it is simply a way for the mind and the body and the soul to bring itself to the nature of things such as they are. You're going to get sick of that word such, but it's a very important word because it carves out this third space between existing and not existing that is pretty central within Buddhism. So, Tatthava, Suchness, and the middle path. These are the themes that I wanted to talk about in this particular lecture.